Dayton's ESPN Radio. Dayton Flyers basketball fans, it's time to wear red and stay loud. Here's Talking Out Loud with Sully on 1410 Wing AM, Dayton's ESPN Radio.
Welcome in, boys and girls, men and women, and all fans of the Dayton Flyers. This is Talking Out Loud, the only hour of the radio dedicated solely to your Dayton Flyers. And I'm your host, Sully, and I'm absolutely delighted that you decided to spend the next hour with me. Got a full show for you tonight. We're going to be doing the second half of the Brooks Hall interview that we recorded last week on the show. Last week, we got into a lot of the early parts of Brooks' career, mainly how he got recruited to Dayton, staying home, being a local kid, and then we kind of stopped right around the 2000 NCAA tournament loss to Purdue. So the bulk of the show tonight will be dedicated to giving you the whole interview. And if you want to hear the whole thing, you know, the entire interview, start to finish, all you got to do is search Talking Out Loud. That's Talking Out, LOWD, Talking Out Loud, into wherever you get podcasts, and you can hear that full conversation. But for now, we're going to have the second part of the interview, picking up right around that 2000 offseason after the NCAA tournament loss, and then kind of recapping the entire career of Brooks Hall. Before we do, a lot of things to discuss tonight as the season approaches, and as the time you are hearing this radio show, the Dayton Flyers season is a mere 20 days away, and we still have no schedule to speak of. Great time to remind you that it has been exactly 320 days since the Dayton Flyers lost a basketball game, and by the time the season starts, you can do the math, it'll be 340 days since the Dayton Flyers have last lost a game. That, of course, was in December of 2019 in Chicago against Colorado. And they might make it a calendar year. They might. But the tournament that they have coming up here in South Dakota, we talked about it last week. It's a loaded field. And Dayton is going to be favored in their first game. So we're going to start there tonight. The projections and the expectations of the season for the Dayton Flyers is becoming a lot more clear. And what I mean by that is, if you are entrenched in college basketball circles, you're well aware of a site called KenPom.com, KenPom.com. KenPom is a comprehensive ranking of all the college basketball teams. It's sort of a statistical Bible for college basketball, and has been for over 20 years now, developed by Ken Pomeroy, a basketball analytics guru. Bringing up KenPom.com today because over the past week, he released his comprehensive 357, I believe, team rankings from top to bottom. That's right. He ranks every team 1 to 357. I believe there's 357 teams in there now. That's way too many teams. I will always say that. But he gives you the ranking top to bottom. And frankly, for us, you know, the other 340 some teams in the country don't matter all that much. So what I use the rankings for is looking at the A10. And I always like to say on my podcast that I'm only going to give you the news of the conference that's relevant to you as a Dayton Flyers fan, and today is no different. So the KenPom rankings came out this past week, and the Dayton Flyers landed themselves right inside the top 50 at number 49. We talked a lot on my podcast over the offseason. We do a lot of preseason episodes previewing the A10 conference, and I like to get a lot of the minds around college basketball on my show to do such previewing. But generally speaking, going into the season this year, it was accepted that the A10 conference had three teams that really have a shot to win it all, win the conference, I mean, and that should be tournament teams. I'm talking about SLU, I'm talking about UD, and I'm talking about Richmond. Richmond's the preseason favorite out of the gate, which is why I was rather shocked that the KenPom rankings didn't give them as much respect as, say, the rest of the college basketball media. So the tier one of A10 teams, again, I'm talking about St. Louis, UD, and Richmond, that's going to be your class of the league heading into the 2021 season. SLU came out ranked 45th. Again, Dayton at 49th. And Richmond, surprisingly, was all the way at number 62. Now, it's without context, these numbers mean nothing to you, but it's good to see that Dayton lost as much as they did and still find themselves back in the top 50. To give you some historical context, the Elite Eight year of 2014, Dayton started the year in the Ken Pom rankings at 70th. They ended that year at 42. The next year, when they lost to Oklahoma in the tournament, that 7-man roster, you may remember, they started the year 50th. They finished again 42. So they improved in those 2 years. 16 and 17, the 2 years where they won the A10 and then got bounced from the tournament in the first round. They started 64, ended 59th. And then in 2017, the senior year of Kyle and Kendall and Scoochie and Cook, they started that year 37th, and they ended right around the same spot at 39th. What I'm getting at right now is that typically Dayton is going to be ranked a little bit higher than they end the season, with that 17-year being a bit of an outlier. Last season, of course, is an anomaly. Dayton started the year ranked 55th in his comprehensive rankings, and they ended that year, and you know, as a 1 seed, I'm not going to stick the knife in. We know where they ended up, okay? We didn't get to play a tournament. We know where they ended up. But I love the Ken Pom rankings every year because, again, it gives you a baseline of how to view the conference. So I'm going to come back to where I started. If you're looking at the whole A10 conference right now, SLU, Dayton, Richmond are the teams you really got to worry about. And then from there, there's a big break. 76, 80, 84, 97, 98. And going down that roster, you have Bonaventure, Davidson, Duquesne, VCU, URI. That's your tier 2. In the A10. And I would say out of those 5 teams, any one of them could end up in the tournament with a good year, and any one of those teams could end up in the bottom 4, to be honest with you. URI has a lot of roster turnover. VCU has a lot of roster turnover. We're not sure what we're going to get with Duquesne yet. Davidson had a lot of lumps last year that they haven't quite been able to iron out. And I think Bona has the highest ceiling of all of them. Do not be surprised if Bonaventure gives people a lot of fits in this year's A10. But again, you're seeing the tiers shake out with SLU, UD, Richmond at the top. And then the 5 teams I just mentioned kind of competing for that middle, I always call it the muck of the A10. In regards to your Dayton Flyers, some things are going to change and some things are going to be exactly the same. Through Anthony Grant's tenure at UD, the Flyers have been number 1 or number 2 in the entire country at 2-point field goal percentage. That was, of course, because of Josh Cunningham out in the first year of AG, then Josh Cunningham and Obi in year 2. And of course, last year, Dayton's offense was one of the most efficient in the entire country. And they were number 1 in effective field goal percentage and 2-point field goal percentage. I see that changing a lot this year because Dayton is going to rely heavily on guard play and not so much on getting easy buckets in the post for a lot of obvious reasons that do not need to be mentioned today. The one thing that has remained constant through Anthony Grant's tenure at the Flyers is their assist to field goal ratio. And what I mean by that is how many times do the Flyers cash a field goal that had an assist that led to that field goal? And in AG's tenure, all 3 years, it's been around 60%. So you can expect it's going to be around 60% this year. And that is really a tribute to the Flyers being able to share the ball efficiently and, have that generate offense. The last thing I wanted to cover is the turnover percentages. The Flyers have been fairly efficient with the ball, not turning over under Anthony Grant. Year 1, around 20%, and that's gone down each year since into the 18% margin, meaning the Flyers are going to turn the ball over about 18% of their possessions, which is about the D1 average. So I don't see a whole lot changing with the Flyers turning the ball over and getting assists that lead to buckets. But what will change is that Dayton is going to be a guard-heavy team. They're going to get a lot of their production from the guard play. It'd be Watson, Rodney Chapman, of course, Jalen Crutcher. And that's going to be different for Flyer fans because the offense was an inside out over the last 3 years, and they had the personnel to do it. But obviously, things have kind of shifted from that regard heading into the 2021 season. With all of that in mind, we're talking preseason rankings, but not a whole lot has changed since last week when I came to you with episode 1 of Talking Out Loud. We are 20 days away from the season, as I mentioned, and we still have no schedule to speak of, but we know the Flyers will be starting the season in South Dakota against Wichita State, a game that we know now Dayton will be favored in by a very slim margin, maybe 1 or 2 points. The Ole Miss game also came out. That's December 19th in UD. Dayton also has a game December 5th in Dayton against SMU. We know now that the game against Ole Miss, UD will be favored in that game, at least according to KenPom, by, again, a slim margin. I brought up all of these rankings and preseason prognostications for you to start the show tonight because the expectations are becoming very clear here in Dayton, Ohio for the coming season. That is, UD is a top 50 team right now out of the gate. And this team has the guns to make the tournament. Again, I mentioned to you in the 4 years that Archie Miller made the tournament, UD finished 42, 42, 59, and 39 in those rankings. So it stands to reason that if they are 49th on this day of our Lord entering the 21 season, that this should be a tournament team, and they have been respected as such by being in that tier 1 of A10 teams going into the season, and then getting the favor on the betting lines early. Of course, there's no betting lines out, but in KenPom projections, UD is favored against Ole Miss and Wichita State. So you can see that the Flyers are getting respect analytically going into this season. And I wanted to make it clear to Dayton Flyer fans out there that, again, the expectation here in Dayton, Ohio for this upcoming season should be tournament or bust. We'll be getting to the Brooks Hall interview on the other side of the commercial break. You are listening to Talking Out Loud, the best hour on the radio dedicated to the Dayton Flyers, and you can only find it on 1410 ESPN Radio, Dayton.
Talking Out Loud with Sully on Dayton's ESPN Radio, 1410 Wing AM.
With thousands of locally owned Napa stores across the nation, chances are that wherever you call home, we do too. And that's why you can find us in big cities, small towns, and everywhere in between, doing what we've always done to help keep our local communities moving forward. So whether you stop by a Napa Auto Parts store, Auto Care Center, or visit us at Napa online, you can count on Napa know-how.
What's in store this holiday at your local Staples?
Gifts and packages shipped with care,
So you can relax knowing they'll soon be there.
Now at Staples, save 25% on UPS expedited shipping services. Plus, save up to 30% on select shipping supplies.
Shop in store or get same-day delivery through Instacart.
Pack it and ship it for less at Staples.
Ends 1/2/21 while supplies last. In-store only. See store for details. Instacart not available on shipping services. Fees, taxes, additional terms, and/or tips may apply. Delivery subject to availability.
Listen to this radio station on the radio.com app. Discover and enjoy your favorite music, news, and talk radio from live stations across the country. Listen anywhere on all mobile and home devices with the radio.com app.
Cordell Transportation is now hiring for brand new home daily dedicated lanes. Earn up to $1,620 per week. A $2,000 sign-on bonus, medical, dental, vision, company paid life insurance. Apply online at CordellTransportation.com.
As a professional painter, you know your customers want a flat finish, but don't want to pay the price of fighting dirt, grime, and scuffs. Use new Behr Ultra Scuff Defense from the Home Depot for a beautiful flat finish, plus stain and scuff defense. And that price starts at just $29.60 a gallon, and that's before the Pro Extra discount. A flat paint that's too tough to scuff. Behr Ultra Scuff Defense, only at the Home Depot. How doers get more done. Available online and in select stores.
Staples helps your business go big with everything you need at amazing prices. From office essentials like paper and ink to health essentials like masks and sanitizer. Save big at Staples.
NFL fans, the season is finally here. Get your picks submitted at wingam.com. Click on contest and enter the Pro Football Challenge. Weekly winners will win $20 in Frickers Fun Bucks. Get to wingam.com and get your NFL picks submitted now. Touchdown! Incredible! Good luck. Whether you're at home, at work, or in your car, tune in to ESPN 1410 Wing AM or stream us live at wingam.com.
Welcome back to Talking Out Loud, the best hour of the radio dedicated to the Dayton Flyers. Jumping back into the second part of the one-on-one interview I did with Brooks Hall. We're picking things up right after the 2000 season. Enjoy. The off-season of 2000, something fairly still interesting to this day that is kind of gone by the wayside because, you know, it's ancient history at this point. But in April, right after you guys got home from the tournament, a couple weeks later, the NCAA put Dayton on probation, and it was tied to some things that they allegedly said, you know, impermissible benefits that happened around you. What was that all about? Like, what was that situation? How did you find out? I mean, that had to kind of put a damper on your off season to be like, you know, oh, what's going on with the program now?
Nah, so actually it was it was before that. It was before I came into my freshman year that it was hot, that the investigation and all that was going on. What I don't remember is maybe they came down with the sanctions after, but that's a whole nother hour segment. So I'll give you the crash course. I went down with that. So and the reason I say it's an hour segment because in order to set the table for that, I would have to go into my growing up, my parents divorcing and my dad and all like that. That actually ties into the story. But what I will say, parents split when I was 12. Ended up living with my dad at the time, unexpectedly. My mom sent me to live with my dad after. So when they split, I lived with my mom for a few months. And then she decided, you know, couldn't do it, didn't want to, whatever. And I love my mom, by the way. Like we've restored that relationship, so I need to say that. But at the time, sent me with my dad. Well, my dad had gone from making, you know, $60,000 a year in the factory, which back then was decent money, to wanting to go back to school and actually got his degree, his master's later at psychology, but went back to school. Well, he took a $40,000 pay cut because he didn't think that he was going to have his kids with him full time. Well, surprise, here I am. And then later, my younger brother, about 2 years later, came. So my dad making $25,000 or so a year with 2 kids and trying to survive. So I say all that to say he did whatever we had to do to survive through high school. Now, as a kid, I didn't know what type of struggle we were in financially. You don't ask your parents. You just you know what I'm saying? You just
whatever that comes up. Yeah,
exactly. So fast forward. We bounced around actually for a few years from city to city and, you know, home to home, girlfriend to girlfriend, whatever, wherever we were living. I think I went to 5 schools in 2 years. And so what ended up happening, going into my senior year of high school, we moved to we get a new home because we were living with one of my dad's girlfriends. He's like, hey, we're moving to a new home in Troy. All right, cool. You don't ask your dad, hey, where you get the money for that, Dad? Where do you move? So I'll never forget it, man. I'm sitting at this new home in Troy, and my dad says, hey, this is like 9 o'clock at night, and it's dark out. I don't remember what I was doing. He said, hey, son, he said, there's some people that's going to come over and talk to you. They're going to ask you some questions. Just answer everything honestly, and, you know, I'll talk to you after they leave. So these people come, and I'm talking suits came, knock on the door. Suited up.
Movie, man.
Yeah, I'm telling you, suited up, ties. I'm like, oh my God, what's going on? So the questions they ask me, hey, how do you know this person or that person? Or, you know, what's your relationship with this? Just random questions to me because I don't know what's going on.
Bro, Men in Black had just came out. You could have Will Smith. You don't know. You know?
Picture that. Seriously, that's the scene. Like I'm getting interrogated, and I'm like, okay. But they were nice. But it was just, why are you asking me who this person is and that person? So very long story short, they leave. My dad says, all right, hey, son, I'm going to give you this heads up. Tomorrow in the news, it's about to come out that I received some money from Clay Mathill. And who Clay Mathill is, he's this billionaire, Dayton alum, owned Iams Pet. I don't know if people know who Iams Food is and all kinds of stuff, man. He just real good dude. But he had heard about my dad's struggle. And he actually gave my dad some money to put a down payment on that home. That got us out of bouncing around from girlfriend to girlfriend. What people don't know is that was self-imposed. So Clay Mathill was just telling Coach Purnell, hey, Coach Purnell, you know, I helped Brooks Hall's dad out. And Purnell was basically like, hey, I don't think you can do that. And so Purnell actually called the NCAA and self-reported it. So that's how all that came out. I knew nothing about it. So the NCAA did their investigation, combed through it, all that. And that's why I never lost any eligibility. That's why, like, they didn't hammer Dayton. I mean, I know we were put on probation. We lost a couple scholarships, but there was no postseason banned because once they did their investigation, they realized it was actually an honest, innocent, situation that I didn't receive any money for. So that's kind of the quick. You get why I said that could go an hour long because there's a lot more to it. But that's what happened, man.
Yeah, well, it's been, and I don't think it's any secret that, like, over the decades, the NCAA has tried fruitlessly to, like, crack down on payments being sent to recruits and, why they went to schools and whatnot. And in your era, like in that 10-year period, unfortunately, the NCAA was grasping at straws a lot to come down with these sanctions, right? The SMU football thing happened in 1990, and everybody said after that it would never happen again. You can't cancel a program again. Just under their circumstance. I mean, their instance was obviously so bad, but the point I'm getting at is that in basketball, I feel like they tried to take like little small steps to like curtail what was going on because it was pretty obvious recruits were getting paid left and right, and it's still to this day. But unfortunately, what ended up happening in that era was guys got slapped with a bunch of ticky-tack probationary things, and Dayton was the same way. They took one scholarship, they took one expenses paid recruiting trip, and then, of course, kind of the end of that fallout era where it reached a tipping point was, of course, the Reggie Bush thing where they slapped him and took away his Heisman Trophy because his parents like took some money from a guy or like somebody paid for his dinners, just some random crap. So, I never knew the context around that situation. But again, I was like 10 years old. Like all I knew was that there was like something that was on Dayton that was like very small. But again, like you said, it didn't really hinder the program any. And, I think you guys kind of, were able to just kind of ignore that and move on to the next season, of course. So that next season, you went out to Maui for the first time, and a lot of people don't know this, but you beat UConn, you lost to Arizona, who was #1 in the country at the time, and then you guys ended up beating Maryland, who went to the national title that year and lost to Duke. The team with Steve Blake, I mean, that was like, one of the best Maryland teams of all time. Yeah. And so you guys had that hot start. You could play with anybody. You came home to the arena, lost to Cincinnati, and then a stinker to Marshall. As you look back at like sophomore year, it really felt like you guys had all the pieces, and then something went wrong.
Yeah, so that hot start, and that's what put us on the map. You referenced the first year, kind of the trajectory changed by that freshman year. It was like, okay, Dayton, let's keep an eye on them. And then that hot start at Maui, we were ranked. Oh my God, we were the talk of the nation after that. Even not winning it, because that Maui field was loaded. Yeah. So we started off by beating UConn, who was 11th or 12th. You might have said that. So
they were 13th. Yeah. Okay,
they were 13, and then Arizona didn't blow us out. Like they ran away late, but it was actually a fairly competitive game. Mm-hmm. And then, to come back and then beat #6 Maryland, I believe. So to come home 2-1 from that brutal field, 3 ranked teams, people were like, okay, they're for real. And then came back and lost to a tough UC team. And then I think we were deflated after that because, again, I said it earlier, you start feeling yourself a little bit, thinking you're better than you are. And so when UC beat us, we didn't take Marshall seriously. We're like, okay, cool. UC beat us. We're going to smack Marshall. They had a guy named Tamar Slay. He was a monster. He was I think he ended up going to the NBA. He passed away, rest in peace. But he came in and they just gave us buckets. They played with no fear. And that sophomore year was a really frustrating year. And then I started dealing with injuries. I don't know if you want to get into all that, but they talk about a sophomore slump. Anytime you have a really good freshman year, there's always a danger of having a sophomore slump. Mm-hmm. Man, I had it. I dealt with stress fracture in my leg, missed a few games. I wasn't myself for that sophomore year. And man, looking back, if there was one year that I wish I could have back, it would be my sophomore season.
Yeah, and it's funny when now I look at that roster because that, like you said, you want it back, right? But that roster was the perfect example of the old guard passing it on to the guys that could get it done, right? And what I'm talking about was like you had Tony Stanley on his way out, who was one of the better scorers that we had in that era. And you had Yonta, who was on his way out as well. But then, you know, the young guys were the guys that carried the program for 3 years after that. I mean, between you, Keith, Nate Green, Ramad Marshall, Sean Finn, I mean, you know, you guys were the program for those next 4 years. So, as you know, hindsight always gives you a little bit better perspective, but I always saw that year kind of like you said, there was some bad things that happened, but it was kind of like a passing of the guard of like, hey, Dayton is in a better position now than we were when we got here. Now you guys have to take it to the next level. And it kind of feels like that's exactly what happened after that 2002 year, or 2001 year rather, was that you guys kind of said, all right, you know, we're not going to be little old Dayton anymore. You know, we're going to take steps to be, you know, a national power, or, you know, just at least be relevant in the conference every year where you're fighting for a title. But I think one thing that I do want to put context around for listeners is how tough the A-10 was in those days.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is not only did you have Xavier, who was, you know, they were perennially on the top of the table in the A-10 every year. Temple was always brought a good team to UD, and St. Joe's was getting into their glory years, you know, where they had like probably their best years ever. You know, I guess you could speak to it better than I can, but in those years, man, you weren't a whole lot of off nights in the A-10. I mean, every other night you were playing somebody that was probably going to the tournament.
Yeah, you made a joke about Fordham earlier, and Fordham was one of the. They were terrible back then, but after,
they're always terrible,
man. But after Fordham back then, it was Dayton's always. The A-10 has always been top heavy. Like every year, the top couple of teams are always really good. But back then, there were always four heavy hitters, and then the middle of the pack. They weren't your scrub middle of the pack.
Anybody could beat you.
Yeah, man. Like George Washington had a guy named Chris Monroe, who was a monster. And Sir Valiant Brown. Does that name sound?
Oh, I remember that guy. Yeah, man. Yeah.
He was like a miniature Allen Iverson. Freshman year averaged like 24 a game or something. I mean, and the list can go on. I can go through each team, but it was a gauntlet. And the problem, and we deal with it now at Dayton, the problem is the A-10 doesn't get a lot of respect. So if we lose to George Washington back then, we understood it. They're a good team, but that RPI didn't understand it, and the voters didn't understand it. You know, so losing to a George Washington could crush your resume, even though they're a good team. And it's just that's how it is, man.
Yeah, and I guess in those days it was even more prominent because the RPI was like an outdated model back then. Like it never gave you accurate results, and it was for the exact reasons that you talked about. Like it didn't really respect any teams that were outside of that Power Five. But you have to understand too, coming from I'm talking to the listeners, like in 2020, why was Dayton relevant? They were relevant because we were on SportsCenter like every other night. I mean, It was like, oh, hey, check out the latest dunks from Obi. And what I'm getting at is in those days, like that didn't exist. I mean, I tell people constantly, like I grew up in Pittsburgh. There were probably 3 days a year where I could watch the Flyers on television nationally. You know, it was the Thanksgiving tournament. I was lucky to get like one non-conference game and then the home and away versus Xavier. And that was the only games that I was seeing if you lived outside of Dayton. So that part, like it fed into it so much because you don't get outside influences standing for your program. You know, you didn't like we had so many writers by February that were like, hey, if you haven't watched these Flyers, like you better watch them, man. And you guys just didn't have any of that buzz back then. You know, it was like beat Xavier on ESPN2 or see you next year.
Yep. No, that's a great point. And then throw social media on top of that.
Yeah, and like you hasn't had that. It was like reading the newspaper every day.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And so it was hard for people to. So, perfect example, my senior year, and I won't jump too far ahead, but that team was as good as the Flyers team this year. Now,
any team we've ever had, any team. I'll say it, really.
That senior team, my senior year, we absolutely would have competed it would have been a good game against the Flyers this year. And I'm not saying we were the third best team in the country. I'm just talking about our roster. But nationally, people did not know that. Now, we ended up getting a 4 seed in the tournament because the people that the committee did their homework. But I'm talking about on a national level, just fans. Fans had no idea who we were. Now, if you would have taken that year, my senior year, and put us in 2020, everybody would have been talking about us.
Yep.
I mean, we had everything. That team was loaded. So to your point, that's a great point. The coverage is a lot different.
Well, in the interest of time, let's skip ahead. And that senior year, you guys had squeaked that one out against Old Dominion earlier in the year. And then a couple of days later, you came home to the arena to play Villanova. It's like one of the most famous shots. The WHIO broadcast is out there on YouTube if people want to watch it. But let's get right to that senior year and talk about that play that night and what happened.
So same thing. It was we were fresh off of that Old Dominion win, hard fought win. Come back, Villanova, young Jay Wright at the time, I believe he was there. And they had a guy named Gary Buchanan. They actually were really good. They were an underachieving team because they had a loaded roster.
It was Jay Wright's second year. I had to go look it up. Go ahead.
Okay. So Gary had a guy named Gary Buchanan, man. He was a certified bucket. I mean, he was a scorer. And then I think they had, I can't remember the other guard they had. It ended up going to the NBA and a couple, they were good. Yeah. And they gave us fits, man. It was, I think they might've been leading like most of the game and we didn't play great. Coming off of that emotional win at Old Dominion. And so what I remember, we finally started chipping away, and came back and tied it up late in the game. And Gary Buchanan, so I'm guarding Gary Buchanan. He has the ball, and he calls for a ball screen. And I was staying with him, and then he goes to drive middle, and the guy came in and set an illegal screen. It was really quick. He clips me a little bit, but the refs didn't call it. So I tried to flop and sell a moving screen. Didn't get the call. But
nowadays I get called.
Oh, absolutely. So what you see if you watch the clip, Ramard Marshall gets his hand in there and strips Buchanan. I think Keith gets the ball or somehow Keith gets it, dribbles up the court like a point guard.
Yeah, Keith's leading the break. I'm like, oh my God, it's going to go bad now.
And then Keith tried to throw this pad and almost chucks it into the stands. And Mark, and we give him a hard time about this. And then Mark saves it to me. So a funny clip or a funny part of that, if you watch my feet, man, I travel. I move my pivot foot,
and
slide.
He's wide open underneath the bucket. Yeah.
While he's wide open, I travel. I split 2 defenders. And, luckily, man, the shot went down. But just why that was a big shot. Villanova was not like a top 25 team then. They were just a good team, but like I said, underachieving. But what was big about it, again, it was the second game in a row where it took some mental toughness to get the win. You get what I'm saying? So that win after the ODU win and then to win at home the way we did, all was over with after that. We were rolling.
Yeah, and you guys got to go to Cameron Indoor that next week, which was pretty cool. I think we've been to Cameron Indoor like twice since 2000. That was one of the times. I don't think that's ever going to happen again. I don't know how Dane's going to end up at Duke again, but
no, they're not getting invited.
Yeah. But you're right. After you guys finished the 8-3 non-con, and the losses were a bad one to Miami, and then a decent St. Louis team, and then you lost at Duke. So coming out of that non-con 8-3, it was certainly nothing to hang your hat on. But then from there, like I had said earlier, Temple always had a good team, right? St. Joe's had just gotten done with their 1 seed year with Jameer Nelson, Delonte West, the best team they ever had. And you guys had to know at that time that, like, this is the year we're going to take the conference if we're going to take it. Did you have that mentality going into the year where you're like, this is the best team we have, and this is our conference now?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. We had big, lofty goals that year. And, everyone says it. They say championship, NCAA. They have all these lofty goals. But But deep down, right? You really believe it, right? No, we really believe we had best. We thought we were a top 25 team, which we were by the end of the year. I think we finished 15, 16, something like that.
16, yeah.
But we knew we had every piece you needed.
Mm-hmm.
We had veteran leadership. We had size. I mean, we were huge.
That was probably the biggest team Dayton's ever had, like in my life, at least. I can't remember a team ever being bigger than that.
I mean, let's go. Finn 7 foot, Wallace Kelsey 6'9". I was 6'6" ish. We had Green at 6'5", DJ Stelly. Anyway, we were big.
Yeah, big.
But yeah, so we knew that this was our year. And when I tell you, we went to Cameron, and when the way we played there, we gave them a game. And if it wasn't for JJ Redick catching fire, and when I say that, I guess what catching fire for JJ is actually just normal for JJ Redick.
Yeah.
But man, if JJ doesn't have a good shooting night, we actually beat Duke. If people don't remember that, it was a good game, and JJ ended up hitting us for 26 and caught fire in the second half. Mm-hmm. So we were we were super confident. So we knew that the A-10 was in trouble because we just believed in ourselves. Yep,
and that's exactly what it was. And of all the years growing up watching the Flyers team, like that's the one I always remember the most. And for obvious reason, I bet you never thought you'd be sitting here in 2020 with that being the last time we won the A-10 tournament. But I mean, here we are. But that year, you guys went 16-2 in the conference, or I guess it was 14-2 back then. You playing 16 games, and you took the hard loss at Xavier. But the game that I was always remember this game, and it was one of those games that solidified hatred for me as a little kid because you gotta hate your rivals when you're a little kid.
Right.
And I'll never forget watching David West drop. That was at 40 some points, and Xavier wins by 1 at the arena. And I can still see him taking that shot, starting at the free throw line, going to the elbow, and winning the game for Xavier. Like, I always wanted to get your perspective on that day because, like you said, you guys went into the year being like, this is our conference. And sure enough, Xavier just found a way to win 2 games. And to this day, I hate David West. I don't know him. I don't know nothing about him. I never met him in person, but oh my God, I hate that guy. I saw him get a ring for the Warriors a couple years ago, and it just made me so angry. I was like, oh, I still hate that guy. I'm a 30-year-old man. Still hate him.
Hey, man, but it's we talked about it earlier, man, the rivalry that people can't, if you didn't experience it, it was real hatred. And so this might, kill your thoughts about it, but I was actually friends with those guys off the court. I mean, I would actually go to Xavier and hang out with them. With David so I don't want to, kill the man.
Me is dying somewhere right now. Yeah,
my bad. But, hey, but on the court, I hated him. Does that help?
Oh no, no, I get that. Now, like I said, like now that I'm an adult, I'm like, oh man, it was probably silly. But yeah, go on.
Yeah, so there was 2 stories, and you combine the 2. So the game where David West hit us for like 47 points and 25 rebounds was at Xavier. And the reason I know that is because, and then hopefully you gave Keith a hard time in your interview because that's who David scored about 40 of those 47 on. And we clown Keith to this day about it. But the strategy actually worked. It was, okay, we're going to let him get his and make the rest of those guys beat us. And so that David West got his. I mean, that was a matter of fact, we say that got him player of the year. That one game right there is what solidified his player of the year. But the strategy worked because we were in the game. We were winning a good part of the game, and then we just choked, right? And then at home, that was that 1 point game that you're talking about with the shot at the free throw line. And it was just a heartbreaker both ways because Xavier was really good, and they had dominated the league for a while. But we knew we had a better team. And so you want to talk about heartbreaking losses, man, even to this day, that one hurts. Even though we won the A-10 championship, the tournament, we wanted that outright league title because it was Xavier. Like, we just wanted to take it from them. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it's funny, you talk about the A-10 championship. How long did that thing last at Dayton?
2 years.
2 years. We knew when we found out we were hosting, we laughed because we knew, and then we won it. We knew it'll never come back, ever.
And it has not come back since. We're going to wrap up on the other side of the break talking to Brooks Hall right here on Talking Out Loud, only on 1410 ESPN Radio Dayton.
Talking Out Loud with Sully on Dayton's ESPN Radio, 1410 Wing AM.
The spread of COVID-19 is still unchecked across the nation, and you need to keep your family safe. Make a new habit and check your temperatures twice a day, once before dinner and before leaving home in the morning. You can't afford to take chances, so use the Exergen Temporal Scanner. Its accuracy is backed by more than 80 clinical studies, and it takes an accurate reading in seconds. It's the only home thermometer used and recommended by hospitals, doctors, and nurses. Quick and easy to use. You can count on Exergen to keep your family safe 24 hours a day.
You know, I don't know what my family would do without our Medicaid and Medicare benefits, but I just found out there may be a way to get even more benefits with no extra costs. That's why I called United Healthcare. United Healthcare showed me how I could get more benefits than I get with original Medicare. A dual complete plan from United Healthcare combines my doctor, hospital, and prescription drug coverage into one plan, plus provides additional great benefits at no extra cost, like dental and vision coverage, rides to and from my doctor, and credits toward health items and food. It's easy to see if you're able to get more benefits. Call United Healthcare at 1-800-222-CARE. That's 1-800-222-CARE. The call is free and there's no obligation. Call soon because the deadline for Medicare annual enrollment ends December 7th. Call United Healthcare now at 1-800-222-CARE. That's 1-800-222-CARE.
Paid actor portrayal. Benefits and availability may vary by plan and location. Limitations and exclusions apply.
Save big money and get 11% off everything now at Menards. From framing and roofing nailers to finish and brad nailers, Menards has a large selection of Metabo HPT air nailers to choose from to help you get the job done. Right now, all Metabo HPT air nailers are 11% off. Get 11% off everything now at Menards. Good through November 7th. Savings are a mail-in rebate. Some exclusions apply. See store for details.
Save big money at Menards.
Staples helps your business go big with everything you need at amazing prices. From office essentials like paper and ink to health essentials like masks and sanitizer. Save big at Staples.
Follow ESPN 1410 Wing AM on Facebook to watch The Justin Kinner Show with Kev Nash. Listen, stream, and now watch. It's The Justin Kinner Show with Kev Nash. Weekdays from 3 to 6 p.m. on 1410 ESPN Radio. All sports, all the time. This is 1410 ESPN Radio.
Welcome back into Talking Out Loud. I'm your host, Sully. We're wrapping up with Brooks Hall, talking about the night that the A-10 tournament was won in Dayton, and we're here in 2020, and the A-10 tournament still has not been won by the UD Flyers since then. But when I did my interview with Keith Wallaskowski, I guess this was a while back. If you want to listen to that whole interview, go search Talking Out Loud, LOWD, wherever you listen to podcasts. But Keith told me that the students weren't on campus that night, so there wasn't a whole lot of partying going on, or he told me he didn't really do anything. Can you confirm or deny that story by Keith?
Oh, man, I don't know where. Maybe Keith didn't go party. I know we went to
He gave me the wrong story.
Yeah, what's he talking about, man? No, I remember thinking, like, we're about to get arrested, like downtown Dayton. And I don't know how. I had a Suburban at the time, and we were partying so hard. I remember Ramad or Frank Iguodala. I had a sunroof, and he had his shirt off and was out of the sunroof, like throwing his T-shirt or waving his shirt around his head, driving downtown Dayton. No, we kicked it that night.
Keith must have been in his room chilling then.
And Keith was my roommate, so yeah, Keith, he probably was in bed by
11. When he told me that, I was like, "There's no way. There was nothing going on. There's just no way, man."
Yeah, he's tripping. We kicked. I remember dudes had their dudes had their shirts off in Tim's, and I remember thinking, like, why are your shirts off? Like, put your shirts on. We kicked it, definitely.
Well, so the next day is Selection Sunday, and I've told this story on the show a bunch of times, but when you at that age, like, I was always looking at rosters, right? Like, how do we match up versus team, and like, what are the stats? Like, I was really deep into stats at that time, and I remember I was watching the selection show with my dad, and they popped up. Tulsa came up on the screen, and I was like, my dad wasn't really letting me swear at that time, but I kind of got away with this one. I was like, oh. He goes, what? I said, this is a tough Tulsa team, man. I said, I don't think we're going to lose. I was like, but this is about as hard of a draw of a 13 that we could get.
Absolutely. Yep.
Did you guys feel that way too? In Selection Sunday, what do you remember about that last kind of week there?
I remember that thinking we got screwed. That's what I remember. I mean, I'm bitter. I'm bitter to this day. Okay, so there's an unwritten rule that everybody knows. The NCAA takes care of their first 4 seeds, and by that I mean they try to keep you somewhat close to home, so you can travel, right? Your fans can travel. They sent us to Spokane, Washington. Number one. Number two, they had us play what was like a 10 o'clock game that night. So bodies were 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock game. It was late. So our bodies, it's midnight, 1 o'clock, right?
Yep.
The second thing is Tulsa was the most underrated 13 seed in the history of the tournament. It had to be.
Oh, yeah.
Because 3 of their guys, they'd gotten in trouble that year. And so there was either injuries and or suspension. So basically they didn't play with their squad for like half the season.
Mm-hmm.
So their record was very misleading. Like they were as good as, 4 or 5 seeds. I mean, it was a good team. So, now with all that being said, we could beat them. We were the better team. But my point though is that was not, like you said, that was not your typical 4-13 first round matchup.
No, it wasn't. And, and it even came to be that, the tournament, like when the field comes out, there's always like a 4 or 5 seed where everybody's on the underdog. And that was, you guys were that game that year, So I won't even ask a question about this. Just that, what do you remember from the Tulsa game now?
Just that it couldn't have gone any worse. I mean, the start, we came out cold. They were the aggressor. They came out, punched us in our mouth, and we wobbled. I mean, they didn't knock us out, as you know. I mean, we got down 20.
Yeah.
And they just came out and took it to us. Now, we spent so much energy coming back. Like they literally got up 20 points on us, and we cut it all the way down. I mean, we tied it up.
So it was like 4 or 5 minutes left, right? You guys?
Yeah. And there was a big call. And I'm sure if you said you interviewed Finn, I'm sure he talked about like how pissed he is to this day about it. But there was a major goaltending call that took the wind out of our sails. It deflated us. So we came all the way back, and I think we're either down 1 or 2, or it's even tied up. And we missed a shot. Matter of fact, I think it was me. I think I drove to the hole, missed a shot. Finn came back and with a putback dunk, a nasty one-hand putback dunk. Crowd goes crazy, whatever. The refs waved it off, called offensive goaltend. And then Tulsa comes down and hits a 3. But if you watch it on film from the overview camera, it was not goaltend. The ball had cleared the rim. It was a clean putback dunk. Mm-hmm. Even the commentators were going nuts. But that just deflated us when when that basket was waved off, and then they came down and hit a 3. It was over after that. It was over.
Yeah. Finn did talk about that. So you guys are. I released the conversation I had with him right before we're releasing this episode, just for that reason, because I think it's great context to just have both conversations right next to each other. Yeah. But for the 2020 year is obviously going to be so wholly unique because the game ended the way it did, or the season ended the way it did, rather. But I think it doesn't really compare. I guess it's hard to even compare the two, but that flight home, and that ride home, I mean, that's got to be a long flight home, man. Like, do you try to forget about it, or what's it like when you're flying home like 4 hours and you're just like done?
Yeah, you're sick. You're sick because. And you just said it, you're done. Like literally my career's over, and it went out that way. Because you go from, and you got to think, man, 24 hours before that, we're looking at our bracket. We're like, hey, we get
who's next?
Tulsa, we're going to beat Wisconsin. Like the teams in our pod, very, very beatable. We're like, man, we can actually make a run. Mm-hmm. And so you go from that 24 hours prior, fast forward, and you're on your flight home and your career's over, and you just got upset, and it's just a weird feeling that you really can't process. And no matter of fact, I think we spent the night there. Actually, I remember we had to actually stay there after that game.
Oh yeah, because it was late. Yeah.
Yeah. So they have to like lay there and stay in the city that you just want to be home at that point, right?
Yeah.
And then you got to wake up, and nowadays they charter all their flights, like private flights. Back then you had to go commercial, so you got to walk through the. And I don't say that like I'm a spoiled kid. I'm saying
that's the worst, man.
You had to be, so you're here, and everybody is looking at you, and you guys just lost, and it just was a terrible, terrible feeling, man. Terrible.
Have you been back to Spokane since? Probably not.
yeah, to try to blow it up. No, I haven't been. No, I'll never, unless I have to. I haven't been back, man. I just, and here I am, 40 years old, 39 years old, and I'm still bitter about that. I mean, it really, but I was happy for the guys the next year. But what I will say, though, to point that out, though, that 5-year span is why Dayton is able to do what they are today, right? Like that literally set the table to where, because you got to think, even though we only made the NIT 2 of those 4 years that I was there, they were all 20+ win seasons, right? And then that 5th year, Gregory comes in and takes them back to the tournament, and it was just setting the table to where people were like, okay, Dayton is for real, and so. Fast forward, and now little stuff, right? So it's all about recruiting. Well, recruits like Nike gear, and they like, because my freshman year, I don't know what brand we played in. It was some weird letter A on my jersey. I don't know what it stood for. I can't tell you. But point being, though, now you put up together a winning program. Now they're wearing Nike gear, and that's how you get recruits. Little stuff like that. So man, I'm proud to be a part of kind of that first wave that set the table to allow us to be where we are today, man. I'm really glad I was a part of that.
And on behalf of Dayton Flyer fans, I mean, I think I can say that we're proud to have you as a face of this program. And we're proud to have all those years that set the table for what we're reaping now in 2020. So it's a great place to leave the conversation for this evening. If you want to hear the full episode with Brooks Hall or Keith Wallaskowski or Sean Finn or any of the other interviews we've done with guys like Kyle Davis or Bobby Worley or Joey Gruden, just search Talking Out Loud, LOWD, wherever you get podcasts, and you can hear those full conversations. But for now, we're going to be coming to you every Thursday, 6 to 7 p.m. right here on 1410 ESPN Radio Dayton. This is your host, Sully. I thank you again on behalf of Brooks Hall and myself for listening to Talking Out Loud. We'll catch you next week.
Talking Out Loud with Sully on Dayton's ESPN Radio, 1410 Wing AM.
Hi, this is Paul Keels, voice of the Ohio State Buckeyes. Keep your home comfort system running smoothly and efficiently with regular checkups from Butler Heating and Air Conditioning. Butler has been proudly serving the Miami Valley since 1949. Don't wait until your equipment breaks. Call Butler today at 937-253-8871. That's 937-253-8871. Go Butler and go Bucks.
The Home Depot has holiday savings of up to 40% off Whirlpool appliances, like a 4-door French door refrigerator for just $15.98. It's perfect for a busy kitchen full of helping hands. That's where its fingerprint-resistant stainless steel finish really shines. Order online and get free delivery. Holiday appliance shopping improved, up to 40% off Whirlpool, now at the Home Depot. How doers get more done. Continental U.S. only, while supplies last. Valid through December 3rd. Free delivery on orders $396 or more.
What do you want to da-da-da? What do y'all want to da-da-da? I have no idea what to da-da-da. We could switch to Progressive da. Oh, yeah? We could switch to Progressive and sa. Okay. We could sa and have to buy some za. Oh, yeah. Let's switch to Progressive to da and get some za with the money we saw. Yeah. Now we know we're going to da-da-da.
These days, nothing is normal and everything is weird. But you could still save big when you switch to Progressive. It might just be the most normal thing you da-da-da.
Quote to da at Progressive.com.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates.
The Montgomery County Veterans Service Commission is here to assist veterans during this COVID-19 pandemic. Even though we are not meeting face-to-face, we are here for you. We understand it is a difficult time with this virus threat and the strain of implementing social distancing. For those Montgomery County veterans who have lost their source of income due to their employers having to close or reduce their business hours due to the COVID-19 pandemic, you may be eligible for COVID-19 special financial relief assistance. Please contact the Montgomery County Veterans Service Commission Commission at 937-225-4801 Monday through Friday for more information or to have an application sent to you. You can also visit mcvsc.org. The Montgomery County Veterans Service Commission is here to help Montgomery County veterans during the COVID-19 crisis. Call 937-225-4801 Monday through Friday or visit them online at mcvsc.org.
Lowe's has everything you need to celebrate home and go all out on decorating this year, like GE pre-lit artificial trees, now just $169. Lowe's, home for the holidays.
Hey, who wants free money? Who are we kidding? We all do. It's the ESPN Dayton hashtag We Want to Get Paid Cash Contest. Listen for the word that wins 18 times a day, starting at 6 a.m. Monday through Friday. Enter the keyword at wingam.com for your chance to win $1,000. It's the ESPN Dayton hashtag We Want to Get Paid Cash Contest. College football playoffs, Browns, Bengals, Buckeyes, and more. Catch the Keith Flyers Show Mondays at noon on 1410 ESPN Radio. WYNG 1410 Dayton, Dayton's ESPN Radio.
The future earnability for players. All of this is what's at stake. It just feels at some point fake to be sitting here talking about one league starting in December, like there'll be no more setbacks. And then at the same time, out of the other side of our mouths, be talking about the leagues we're watching right now, curious if they'll be able to play not just this week, but every week moving forward. Until we get some answers to what we're seeing today, I don't know how we can possibly predict what we will be seeing next. In 60 seconds, Saturday morning, West Coast football.
College football, it's the game you wake up early on Saturdays for, even though kickoff isn't until 7. The game where the Goodyear blimp becomes a Hall of Famer. The game that goes just beyond school, spirit, fandom, or love of the sport. It's the game where the comebacks happen. It's the game where anything can and will happen as long as you have the drive. Because college football is the game that moves you. We get it because it moves us too. Goodyear, more driven.
It's time for some straight talk. Look, we all drop our phones. It happens. You fumble it, crack it, splash it. Well, Straight Talk Wireless now offers this new Platinum Unlimited plan that includes phone protection. Just $65 a month for unlimited talk, text, and data, plus 20 gigs of hotspot, 100 gigs of cloud storage, and more. All on the best network. Straight Talk Wireless, no contract, no compromise. See Mobile Protect terms and conditions at Asurion.com/Straight Talk. Limitations and exclusions apply.
The Pac-12 is going to kick off particularly early this weekend with USC kicking off at 9 a.m. And while I love that because it lets us watch Pac-12 highlights all day, puts them bigger into the discussion about the greatness of college football every Saturday, I think Mike Golick Jr. has made a strong point. At some point, don't we